Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video in the Kotlin series. In this video, I'm going to teach you guys how to read input. So at the moment, all the programs that we've made using Kotlin are pretty static, meaning that they do the same thing pretty much every single time because we create these variables, we give them numbers, and these numbers don't change unless we change the numbers, before we run the program. But every single time we run the program, using those numbers, it will always have the same outcome for the most part. And so one of the things that you can do to make your programs more dynamic and a little more realistic even is by reading input from the console. After learning this, you could really spice up your programs to make them a lot more interesting. So let's just get started. So the first thing that we can do is we can start to ask for something like enter your name. Let's just try and get the name of the user. So we're going to do val name. So the data type will be a string, a nullable string. And to read the string input from the console, all we have to do is to read line or null. So as the name implies, we're going to try reading a line of input from the console when we're running the program. If it doesn't get anything, it's just going to return null. That's why it's a nullable type, okay? Now after that, we're going to go ahead and test it out by doing your name is name, just like that. So we're going to read the name from the input, and then we're going to print out the name to verify that we, got it successfully. So let's go ahead and start by running this program and see if it works. All right, there we go. So the first thing that we get is enter your name. And if you click into this little console window here, you can see that the cursor starts blinking, which it did not do before. So this is implying that you're now able to enter input. So if you type on your keyboard, you can put in literally whatever you want. So it's asking for a name. So I'm just going to put Billy the Pickle Man. All right, so my name is Billy the Pickle Man, and then to enter that, input to your program, you just press enter, and then it says your name is Billy the Pickle Man, and then it says process finished with exit code 0. So because there was no more code after this line, the program just terminated. And that's literally it. So we're able to print out a message. We already know how to do that. But then after that, we read a line of input into a string variable, a nullable string variable called name, and then we print it out just to verify what we read from the input. Pretty awesome, right? So something else that we can do is getting a number from the user. So let's say that instead of their name, we also want to get their age, one of the basic things I always have in these programs. So we're going to say enter your age, and then we're going to say val age, it's a nullable integer, is equal to read line or null. And if we do control Q, this will tell us the documentation on what this little function here does. It says it reads a line of input from the standard input stream and returns it, or return null if the end of file has already been reached when readline or null is called. And then it has a return type, which is a nullable string. So the question is, if this gives us a nullable string every single time we read input, how can we get that as an integer, right? Because if we're going to ask for the age, we want the age as an actual integer because that makes more sense, for storing a number, because then we could do integer stuff with it, like we can add and stuff like that, right? So to convert the string into an integer, we can do toInt or null. This is just a method that's available to strings. So if we check out the documentation here, it says parses the string as an int number and returns the result or null if the string is not a valid representation of a number. So all this is saying here is that it's going to take the string that was read from the input, attempt to convert it into an integer. If it cannot, then it will return null. If it can, it returns the actual integer, okay? So toInt or null, that's what that does. But we get an issue here, right? Because you cannot call a method on something that could be null. This is nullable, right? It's a nullable string. So we can fix that by doing the question mark. And as we learned about before, when you add a question mark on top of a nullable variable, this will basically mean that if this is null, then the entire thing will be null. That way we don't get a null exception or anything like that when trying to call this method. Because if you're trying to call this method on something that's null, you get an exception, okay? You don't want that. Anyway, so that's just what we learned about from the previous episodes, right? So now we should have the age. So we can say if age is not equal to null, because age, of course, is nullable, right? We can print out you are age years old. Otherwise, we'll say else invalid age was entered. All right, so let's go and test it out, and then I'll explain this again in a second, all right? All right, so it says enter your name. I'm going to say Cody. Enter your age. I'm going to say 23. There we go. It says you are 23 years old. Let's see what happens when I put an invalid string for the age. So I'm going to say Cody again, or I put Odie, oops. Now I'm going to say taco for the age. And it says invalid age was entered. So how did it know to, print out invalid age? So again, the way that this works is it's going to give you a nullable string. So it's going to read the input as a string, okay? And then on this method here, so toInt or null, the way that this works is basically if you put in 23 as input, obviously a string that has 23 inside of it can be converted into an integer, right? But a string that has taco inside of it obviously cannot be represented as an integer. That just doesn't make any sense. So that's why we have or null, because if you get that situation, then it's just going to be returned as null, okay? The alternative to this is if you do just toInt, if it cannot convert that string into an integer, instead of returning null, it will throw an exception, a number format exception, which we haven't learned about exceptions yet, but this is just another way of dealing with that particular situation. But the way that we're going to do is with or null. So again, if it cannot convert that string into an integer, because it doesn't make sense, like taco, for example, it will just return null. And therefore, if this was taco and it returned null, age is going to have the value of null, right, because it's a nullable integer. And therefore this is going to be false, and it's going to print out invalid age was entered. So that's why it did that, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Something else I want to add real quick is that, up here I'm doing toInt or null, but if for some reason you need a different data type, like a boolean or a char or a double or something like that, there's obviously methods for those different data types, okay? So just depending on those situations, you can use whichever one you need, all right? And that's pretty much it. That's literally all you need to know to be able to read input for your programs now. And I'm going to show you one more thing, but before I do that, I just want to say, like, this is pretty awesome, right? Now our programs are going to be a lot more dynamic because, in our previous programs, we have our variables hard-coded with certain values, like I said before, but now we can have our programs input. We can have the user of our programs, whoever that might be, input whatever they want to. So for example, we can make a calculator program that can take in, any two numbers and add them together or do any type of operation like that. We can make some really cool stuff, all right? So hopefully with this video, you guys will now be able to try, just play around and see if you can create some cool stuff. Anyway, so the next thing I want to show you guys is now how to make a program that can add two numbers together. I just gave you that example, so might as well just show you how to do it. All right, so we're going to need two numbers to add together, so let's get those as input. So we're going to start with enter the first number. I put a little space so that there's like, space between the, the question and the input. And then we're going to say val num1 is equal to read line or null question mark, because it's nullable, dot toInt or null, just like we did above. All right, so these two variables now should have those two numbers that we want to add together. So let's go ahead and actually add them. We can do that different ways, but let's just do it like this. So we can say the sum of num1 and num2 is, and then we could do an expression like this and do num1 plus num2. Pretty clean. Or we could store that in a variable and then print it out. It's up to you, really. And now it's just warning us because we're trying to add together two nullable numbers. So let's just try checking to see first if num1 is not equal to null and num2 is not equal to null. Then we'll go ahead and print out the sum of those two numbers, okay? So let's go and try this out, see what happens. So we're going to say enter your name Bob, we're going to say 12, and then we're going to put the first number, we're going to say 3, and then the second number is 90, so there we go. The sum of 3 and 90 is 93, so it works perfectly. Pretty cool, right? Let me show you now how you can make this a little more advanced. So we learned before about while loops and do while loops. Let me give you a situation where both of those are kind of useful. So the first thing that we want to do is have it so that we can continually repeat this process over and over. Let's say that we don't only want to add two numbers and then that's it. We want to be able to add numbers over and over and over until, we get bored or something like that, right? So this is a situation where an infinite while loop could, be a benefit. I'm not saying you should always do it like this, but this is a good situation where it kind of makes sense, just for a basic program at least. So we could start by putting this in a while loop with the condition of true. So it's infinite, it's always true. And then since this is always going to repeat, we're always going to be able to ask for two numbers and then print out the sum, right? So let's go and try this out. Enter your name Bob, 12. So enter the first number 1, 2. So the sum of 1 and 2 is 3. We can do the same thing over and over. So 3, 4, or 3, 5 is 8. 7, 9, 16. So perfect, right? And then we could do 5, and then let's just do like a space. And so since we did space for the second number, this would be null because toInt or null, that would be a null because it can't be converted. So this condition would fail and then nothing would happen. So just go to the next iteration of this loop here. All right, so that's just a small example on how you can make a little bit of a more advanced program that can add two numbers together, just using, reading input from the console and also adding an infinite while loop so that we can make it repeat over and over and over until they want to kill the program and stop adding numbers together. In the next video though, I'll give you guys a little bit of a challenge so that you can make a little bit of a more advanced calculator app that can do different types of operations, and it'll be cool. So just stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode, guys. Hopefully you found this interesting. Now you can read input from the console, and now you should be able to make way cooler programs. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. So that's it for this video, everybody. I really hope you learned something new. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, and if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Make sure to also check the description below for important links to code and other resources, but also really important, join our Discord. We have a big community of over 5,000 programmers, and it's a place where you can find new friends or get help on any code that you're stuck on. If you want to support what I do on this channel, please consider hitting the join button below, and this will allow you to support my channel for as low as $1 a month, but there are different tiers to choose from if you want to. For anyone that becomes a member on my channel, you get a special rank on my Discord server, early access to new videos, and you can just see yourself on the screen right now. So if that sounds cool to you, feel free to join. If you don't want to, that's fine. If you can't, that's okay too. I really just appreciate you watching the video anyway. Thank you so much. And that's it. Peace.